This video was originally going to have a different intro, but after I drafted most of this outline, I got some bad news, which I will not be sharing because I don't like to share details of my personal life on the internet. But because of the fact that the Francesca and Michaela topic has received unwarranted hate online, I just want to make sure that I communicate that any lower energy in my delivery of sharing what I've written up about this topic has absolutely nothing to do with this being the next A plot. I'm still processing things emotionally, things that have nothing to do with Bridgerton. Normally, when I cover Bridgerton on my channel, I aim to deliver things with a higher energy and joke around quite a bit. But emotionally and cognitively, I'm simply not in a place to be able to do that right now. That being said, don't worry about the details of Francesca and Michaela's storyline not being as extensively covered in this video because we are going to be doing something similar to what I did for Banofi, where we went through the source material book during the off-season in order to do a bit of compare and contrast between book and show canons, as well as speculate on what might be kept or revised in the upcoming adaptation process, and it's just a good way to fill the far too long wait period between seasons. Not to mention, the further we get through the book, the closer we are to a new love story airing, so it's yet another way of counting down. I will work on processing the things I need to process offline, and I'm sure that I will find my way back to being able to joke around again when it comes to the show. Thank you for your understanding, and now let's carry on with the things that I wrote up before my personal bad news arrived. Hi, I'm LadyJenevia, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Netflix has announced that Francesca Bridgerton and Michaela Stirling will be the A-plot storyline of Bridgerton Season 5. So we're going to talk a bit about that, as well as some of the other talking points, such as the speculations that were already in motion about whether or not Eloise would be Season 5, though of course now we know that she will instead be Season 6, the concept of one or the other going first and second from those two Bridgerton love stories. Book spoilers are fair game at this point because we, and by we I mean I, have now read all of them, A through H. I still have one more Bridgerton Season 4 review to do for episodes 7 and 8. I had written up about maybe 70 to 75% of that video, but I got delayed in finishing that because we found another cat. Yes, really. She was outside and she was in heat and she was docile enough to let me pick her up, so really I had no other choice but to bring her inside, and now she is in the bathroom because we are waiting for an upcoming appointment for her to be able to get fixed. Also, I am about 95% sure that she is from the same family tree as another cat we previously rescued because of the fur pattern around her mouth. It's identical to the mother cat we rescued, as well as her two babies that had that same fur pattern, just in different colors. I'm also going to have to rewrite parts of that last Season 4 video, so I will thank you in advance for your patience and understanding regarding the extended amount of time it's taking to finish that. But now we're going to talk about Francesca's examination and why it was that I thought that she was pregnant after watching those final 2 episodes of Season 4. With the gift of hindsight, I can now look back on that and say that I was so alarmed and taken aback by the fact that we were all up in Francesca's situation like that I was so put off by what I was seeing that it's like my brain was trying to insulate me from witnessing such a jarring, unwelcoming thing happening in the story, and that is part of the reason why I thought that the season had ended with her being pregnant. See, I have a thing where if a film, or in this case a series, is of a particular genre, a premise, or something that it's selling to the audience, if it violates the social contract that I have in my mind of where I'm at, it can throw me off. I will give you a bit more of an explanation on that. If I go to the cinema to see a new horror film, I am probably not going to be surprised if violence happens. Now, there are some types of violence I would rather not see, regardless of the genre or premise, but usually the trailer will give you some type of idea of what the emotional tone and basic premise is, so when I go and sit down to go on that journey, I have an idea of what I'm there for. For example, I somewhat recently attended a press screening for Ready or Not 2. I reviewed that film. I had a really fun time with it. I knew that there was going to be violence in that because there was plenty of it shown in the first film, and they had shown some violence in the trailers for the second film, so overall, I was prepared to see that. But with Bridgerton, they are selling fantastical romance to the audience. Every season, you have a particular letter of the alphabet, and that respective Bridgerton is going to have their love story and their happily ever after. Now, they're all parasitic landlords who have plenty of time for leisure, so they're not really struggling the way that Samara Weaving and Catherine Newton were struggling in Ready or Not 2. By the time Bridgerton Season 4 Part 2 was released, I had read the A through H books, but there were and are even more unknowns surrounding Francesca's story going into that as the A plot because of the fact that they've done a gender swap. Now, for anyone who needs a reminder, do not say anything anti-sapphic in my comments because it's not welcome here. Everyone should get to have a piece of the pie, and in this case, the pie is a fun, fantastical romance. In watching everything leading up to that examination in the latter bit of season 4, and me clearly experiencing some type of blackout because wow, that is not what I meant when I thought to myself about how I want to know more about the interiority of the characters. That's not what I meant. I was under the impression that by showing John and Francesca struggling with fertility throughout season 4, that was going to be the fertility struggle part of Francesca's story on the show, as she was shown to struggle with fertility across both of her love stories that happened in the books. I figured that by doing things that way, you would be able to have Francesca be pregnant with a baby by John, like she was in the book, but instead of miscarrying, she could have her baby, and that baby would be the heir, and then she would have the material logistics in place for Francesca to be able to set up her life. She could settle into things as a single mother/widow in season 5, and then she would be free to do her love story with Michaela in season 6. That was my theory early on. That was what made sense to me while I was making my way through season 4, and especially when I was in a rush trying to get through the second half of that story while also scrambling to get many other things done in my life. In the book, Michael becomes the heir after John dies, and because Michael is in love with Francesca, she is under no obligation to move out because Michael is not going to make her do that. She can stay living where she's already living and overseeing that estate and whatnot because Michael isn't going to do it. Michael is instead running away to India because he is so guilt-ridden about having been in love with her for the entire time that he's known her, and how could he ever pursue anything with her when he also loved his cousin John dearly? After Michael and Francesca have gotten together, they're married, happily in love, years go by. Years of trying, and eventually she is able to get pregnant and become a mother. Again, to be clear, because you would be surprised by what comments I will get on any number of YouTube videos where people will ask or say something that I have already addressed in said video, but anyway, this is not an anti-Michaela space, and that rhetoric is not welcome here. But currently, with no other information to go off of, I don't know what the plan is. I don't work on this show. Does Francesca just not get to be a mother? And I mean, if that's a change you want to make, it's your choice to make. You're the ones that are being paid to create the show. You could have children simply end up in their lives, and the two of them could adopt those children so that they may experience motherhood in another meaningful way. But where my primary confusion is about this storyline, I go back to the issue of the way inheritance works in this world. Where does the Kilmartin estate go if Francesca isn't actually pregnant with an heir? Now, I don't like these inheritance rules. They're antiquated and gross, but they are part of the world-building rules of this story's universe in this alternate version of a historical series. And you gave Francesca this really emotional monologue to Violet about how at least Violet was able to have 8 children with Edmund before he died. Clearly, Francesca wanted to have children, or even one child with John. If you want to say I'm being overly sentimental about this, well then so be it. If it were me, I would have let Francesca be actually pregnant and get to have that baby. I would have made the pregnancy and birth challenging just to maintain some sort of scientific continuity with the book canon. But of course, Francesca would survive, and so would the baby, and that baby would be the heir, and you know that Michaela would have, of course, loved that baby as if it were her own, as she and Francesca fall in love with each other, because it would be a small leap from being the fun aunt to your nephew that was fathered by your favorite cousin to adopting said nephew as your son. I don't have a strong opinion right now about what should or should not be done now about this part of the Francesca storyline, because it's far too early to know what they plan to do with this, but do feel free to put your theories in the comments because it would be interesting to begin to brainstorm more about those things. Now that we have this confirmation of Francesca being the main Bridgerton of season 5, I thought that we would go through some of the additional talking points and various details regarding the storylines for both Eloise and Francesca, just to untangle some of what's in play here. One of the reasons I am weary about Eloise not going next is because I don't have as much confidence in the show's ability to give her an interesting storyline for yet another season sitting on the bench, or the shelf, I suppose. My skepticism about the quality of writing for Eloise's material is not a criticism of Francesca and Michaela as a couple. One of my patrons commented the following when I posted about this announcement on my community tab. "Zero hate to Francesca and Michaela. Honestly, I'm on board. But Eloise had such a perfect launchpad this season, it feels like a waste to bench her. My biggest fear is that she'll get the Benedict treatment, given aimless filler that stalls her momentum while we wait. Also, if they need a 2-year time jump for Francesca to grieve, having Eloise lead season 5 was the perfect solution to show that time passing naturally. I guess the silver lining is that when we finally get to Eloise's season, it won't be another leading couple featuring Francesca situation like the last 2 years have been." We haven't fully talked about this yet because I haven't finished my review video on episodes 7 and 8, but there is a conversation Eloise has with Hyacinth about how now she sees that there are other things a person could enjoy about marriage, such as companionship, family, and Eloise notes how their parents getting married gave Eloise all of her siblings, whom she adores. If you've read Eloise's book, this would have come across like a signal that they were warming her up to finally meet her endgame love interest, as well as the children he's struggling to raise, and so on and so forth, all of the things to do with that story. This comment about how Benedict was given aimless filler that stalled his momentum, I 100% agree with that. Season 2 would have worked perfectly fine as a launching pad for his love story because he was trying to pursue his art, but he lost his motivation because of everything that happened with the art school and his creative spark in the process. So what could have happened next? He finds his muse, Sophie, and she would also see the person he is underneath all of that second son chatter. Moreover, Eloise in the book feels disillusioned by the fact that she had previously believed that she would have Penelope to keep her company as her bestie in spinsterhood. They would have been able to navigate that together. Penelope getting married to Colin was an enormous plot twist to Eloise in the book, so that helped to push her towards doing this wild and crazy thing of running off to meet a man whom she's never met in real life but only corresponded with through letters. But they changed the order of the love stories on the show, so Benedict had to go after Colin. That being said, Eloise on the show clearly had a closer relationship to Benedict than any of her other siblings. This was something that was established all the way beginning in season 1 and was maintained across the seasons that followed. In season 4, Benedict's season, Eloise expressed to Benedict that she got jump scared by the idea that he might have found someone and gone and settled down, leaving her alone to be the odd one out in their family. Benedict getting his happily ever after would have made sense as a reworked version of what's in the book to match the differences in characterization and relationship timelines on the show that overall amount to it would have made sense to have Eloise go next. And believing that it made sense for her to go next is not a criticism of Francesca and Michaela as a couple. Now, all of that being said, the point in this comment about how Francesca going next means that now we can just do her story, so then we don't have yet another leading couple featuring Francesca situation. That is also an extremely valid point. The favoritism towards Francesca that has been shown in both seasons 3 and 4 has been extremely unsubtle. So in that context, of course, it makes perfect sense to do her next, because if you clearly have blinders on about her, then yes, of course, do her next. I have been told by commenters on my videos that there's going to be this 2-year gap within the show's timeline between seasons 4 and 5. I am assuming we will see Hyacinth make her debut in season 5, so with Eloise not being next up, I do like the idea of Hyacinth and Eloise being a comedic duo of sorts, or even Eloise with both Gregory and Hyacinth, just them being a hilarious trio together. I feel like we have not unlocked the full potential of the family banter for those characters together. Now, Eloise was not funny in the book, but Claudia has made Eloise funny on the show. But overall, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to trick myself by assuming that I won't like Eloise's storyline in season 5, not because that's a 100% prediction I have, but only because I want to reverse psychology myself. If I keep my expectations low, I am more likely to have the freedom to enjoy whatever fun may emerge from her storyline in season 5. If I use season 4 as a reference for Eloise, there were multiple moments where I had a lot of fun watching her, and that was entirely because of Claudia's skills as a comedic performer. Violet telling Eloise to smile at eligible men, and Eloise doing this pained grimace. That action on paper isn't necessarily funny, but Claudia made it hilarious because she is simply that skilled of a comedienne. So I don't want to hear anything from anyone saying that I'm being unfairly negative about Eloise having another season on the bench. I'm making it very clear to you publicly on a public platform called YouTube that I am doing reverse psychology on myself. If I prepare myself for the worst, any enjoyable parts of her season 5 story will be things that I have the time of my life watching. In the Eloise book, she and Philip first become acquainted by being pen pals, so that would be the primary thing to look out for. If you see her constantly scribbling away with a quill in the background, we could point at the screen and say, hey, I see you and I know what you're doing. Also, if we get official news in one of the season 5 episodes that Marina has passed away, that would also be a major catalyst for setting up Eloise's love story. It's the first thing that happens in her book. Now, if you don't like that that is part of her storyline, I am not saying you're wrong for feeling that way. I am only saying what was in the book, and I am presenting that as something to potentially look out for depending on how faithful of an adaptation it ends up being. But again, circling back to Francesca and Michaela, the A-plot of season 5, I talked about this a bit in my overall review of season 4, but I will reiterate a couple of the talking points now that this is officially next up. There are some folks who were not a fan of the introduction of Michaela specifically. This is back in season 3, because Francesca had worked so hard in season 3 to defend herself to her mother, to make the point that not every love story has to be this dramatic fireworks thing right from the start. And then they just undermined Francesca's argument by having her stuttering through meeting Michaela for the first time. So as a point of comparison, if you didn't already know this, in the book, Michael was the one who fell in insta-love with Francesca and yearned for her for years. I'm not saying that they needed to go 100% faithful according to book canon, but because we're going to be spending the off-season comparing and contrasting, this would be an example of contrast between the two versions. As a broad principle, though, I have no complaints about Michael being changed to Michaela. I just want more romantic fiction to exist in general, and I'm not attached enough to any of these books to the point of insisting that the adaptations need to be exact copy and pastes from one medium to another. Whenever I get a comment from someone acting like the Bridgerton writers broke into their homes and stole their wallets simply because they gender bent Michael into Michaela, I just don't want to engage with it, because more often than not, I don't think that social media is a productive space to have a meaningful dialogue. Netflix should be more queer, actually. Make another season of Sense8, but if and only if at least one of the Wachowski sisters wants to continue with that story. I would watch it. When we reach season 4, I felt that they hit many of the milestones that were important for that trio of Francesca, John, and Michaela, but I had some issues with the pacing. I would have preferred for Francesca and Michaela to already be friends, or become friends early in season 4 and then spend most of the season as friends, and then John passes away. Of course, Francesca would ask Michaela to stick around, but then when Michaela realizes, oh no, I've caught feelings, let me flee, it runs the risk of making Michaela seem flaky as a person, and on the show they had only just become friends what felt like all of 5 seconds ago, since you have far too many characters and storylines on the show and it's only 8 episodes per season. So it just felt like we were slightly off with the timing from where we needed that to be. Another example of that would be that I didn't like that we didn't get more material of John and Michaela together as bestie cousins, because by not showing us that, it was doing a disservice to Michaela as a character. We need to understand the depths of how much John means to her, because that is the reason why she's running away. But if you're dealing with a general audience who hasn't read the books and doesn't engage in any sort of communal discussions of the material where you exchange information and theories, you are potentially setting Michaela up as a character to be misunderstood in a way that she doesn't need to be. Now, this being said, these nitpicks I have are so much smaller in comparison to how fundamentally I did not care for the quality of writing for Benedict in the season leading up to him being the main Bridgerton. So for Francesca and Michaela being the next up, I am not that worried about the show being able to get their love story right because of a couple of reasons. I was so pleased with the way that they did the A plot for season 4. The Benofi love story, I would gladly rewatch them just for the joy of watching them go through that entire journey. And they fixed more or less everything that needed to be fixed about Benedict's characterization in his book. As such, I have far more confidence going into season 5, and that confidence would have been there regardless of which love story was going to be chosen to go next. Moreover, as I've already said, Francesca has very clearly been shown a disproportionate amount of favoritism since season 3, so my best guess is that her season will have an excellent love story for me to get swept up in. This is the one that you've clearly been wanting to do, so I'm going to assume that you already have this clearly outlined and prepared and ready to go. I've seen some questions raised in the comments regarding things like how the show is no longer matching the order given in the Pall Mall game in season 2. All I can say in response to that is that was done by a different showrunner. When Francesca tells Michaela about how Benedict has fallen in love with a maid and the family is supporting this match, but of course her background is going to need to be kept secret, Michaela is stunned, but it also came across to me like it was foreshadowing how the Bridgerton family can be open-minded when it's one of their own and when it's a love match. So it's a way of teeing up the Bridgerton family to eventually accept Francesca and Michaela as a love match, and Benedict can also be tagged in at exactly the precise overly dramatized moment to be supportive as the other LGBT family member, and Sophie would also be their immediate ally because she already knows about Benedict being bi. But I really hope that they will film some extra bits with John for season 5 as well, flashbacks in particular, to better flesh out his and Michaela's relationship. And as you will see when we go through the book during the off-season, John is really important to Francesca and Michael in the book, even when they're embarking on this passionate love story together. So hopefully they will do something more with him as a character on the show. Also, I think most of us are in agreement here that Victor is fantastic as John, so we would happily welcome seeing him pop up at least one time in some sort of loving memory. Whatever infighting there inevitably is about this latest announcement, I've seen none of it, and I want no part of it because I want every Bridgerton season to be a success because, as I've said many times before, I want more romantic fiction to be greenlit, but preferably in films released in cinema because that is the superior way to experience art, no matter what this or that CEO has to say about that. And now that I've read all of the A through H stories, I'm going to be even more supportive of Francesca and Eloise's seasons because if you think that I'm going to let this show end without them doing the most fun stories, which are Gregory and Hyacinth's, you need to dial in and understand that those are the books with the greatest potential of them all. I don't want to see them happen now because those two actors still look like babies to me. But considering that they take an obscene amount of time to release new seasons of this show, it will not be weird to me when we finally reach the last two stories and it's their turn to be the leads. But first, we are going to do all of the coverage for Francesca and Michaela's love story. We are going to go through the source material during the off-season, just as a way to help pass the long wait time and speculate on which details they might keep in the adaptation process. And if this wasn't obvious, when I say the name Michael, I am simply referring to the book canon. That is not a way of me trying to undermine Michaela on the show. You would think this point would be obvious, but never underestimate the ability of social media to overreact to something inconsequential. Even if I make it clear multiple times that hate is not welcome here towards this couple, someone will still manage to get upset at something somehow. That is the unfortunate reality of reactionary social media. Covering the book is simply my way of following a similar model of what I did for Benedict and Sophie during the long wait leading up to their season. And of course, in the process, I get to keep promoting libraries. We get to do our reading check-ins, all of those things. Oh, and I don't want to make this a recurring thing of wagging a finger at the audience because nowadays I aim to have my discussions of Bridgerton be fun. It's just a bad time in my life right now, which has me more subdued in my energy. But I saw a clip somewhere online of Alan Cumming doing some sort of heated rivalry event where he was a moderator, and he was making the point about how there are far less LGBT plus stories, romantic or otherwise, being greenlit by Hollywood because of the current administration that Hollywood is attempting to suck up to. And they're more so inclined to simply acquire things that have been made by other countries and those industries. Heated Rivalry being an example of that, because that show is from Canada originally. I'm not asking anyone to eventually rank this particular couple as their number one of the already existing and still to come Bridgerton seasons, but I would ask folks to just try to remember the bigger picture here of how it looks when you're really aggressively lashing out online about a gender-bent couple in a fantastical romance show. Whenever I see inflamed reactionary chatter about a romance show like Bridgerton, I find myself deeply saddened that we're losing focus and forgetting who the real villains are in this world. Tech bros, CEOs, weapons manufacturers, billionaires, those are the people that bother me. A gender-bent love story is the absolute last thing that could bother me. I have no intention of continuing to repeat this point in detail as it applies to the naysayers of this love story in the many videos that I will eventually make in the lead up to season 5, because there's no argument to be had. It's been 2 years of this being public information that this love story would be happening eventually. You've had more than enough time to process this. And if the environment feels too hostile, my genuine suggestion, this is not a joke, is to quit Twitter. I'm not being flippant here. As I've said before, I quit Twitter for numerous reasons, the ownership, the policies, and so on and so forth. And I felt noticeably better once I stopped using it. I would never be active on there again. To this day, I have never seen whatever the worst of the backlash is against this pairing, because by the time this was revealed on the show, my social media algorithms were first and foremost prioritizing showing me horrific things that were happening and still are happening in West Asia. When it comes to Francesca and Michaela, there is no arguing to be done from me anyway. There is only a love story, and we're going to give that love story full attention, but after I finish covering season 4, because I'm only one person doing all of this myself, so things take however long they take for me to complete. But the girls will absolutely get their full countdown and build up for the next 2 years, so stay tuned for all of that.
Lesbian pudding?